have protective clothing, that they manipulate the virus through mechanical arms, that the virus is in a special cabinet behind glass and stuff like that. Also, these labs are only accessible through double doors with electronic codes, and it's more or less can be virtually ruled out that this contamination was accidental, let alone a contamination of 72 kilos. The other question is, why did Baxter have the bird flu virus in its laboratory in the first place? Because it is one of the most lethal viruses in the world, and this is facility in Orson, the donor at least, is supposed to be just an ordinary flu production centre and a research into other kinds of sort of standard vaccine material. The World Health Organization supplied WHO with this bird flu virus, or the genetic material for it. So we see a clear link here with WHO giving Baxter the lethal virus, which Baxter used to contaminate the material, and then distributed to the labs. And if it hadn't been caught by a lab technician in the Czech Republic in the lab of Biotest, it would have gone into vaccine material, and people would have got the bird flu from taking this vaccine. And then immediately, of course, WHO would have called a pandemic level 6 and implemented this vaccination program very, very rapidly. It's important to realize that this bird flu virus, too, is actually a lab-engineered virus. It was reconstructed from the genetic material of a victim of the Spanish flu, this woman was dug up from the Alaskan tundra, I think in 1996, by Jeffrey Taubenberg of the Army Institute of Pathology in Maryland. He took out sort of lung tissue, and then he went back to his lab and he tried to reconstruct this deadly Spanish flu virus, and he and his team kept publishing their progress in journals like The Scientist or Science and Nature and so on. So you can actually follow the progress as they try to reconstruct this virus. And the H1N1 virus, they've also been working on, and it seems to be an earlier, less lethal version of the bird flu virus. Now, just a few weeks after the Baxter incident failed, we can say they didn't get away with their plan to start a bird flu virus in Austria and in that area. The swine flu mysteriously appeared in Mexico City, and indeed just 50 kilometers from another Baxter facility. The real winners of any pandemic are not just the pharmaceutical companies, it's also the World Health Organization. As soon as it declares a pandemic level 6, it acquires extraordinary powers over the local health authorities and the law enforcement authorities of all its member states. And crisis committees, which have assumed key government functions, are being set up. Indeed, they've already been set up in France and Austria, and I'm sure in the UK too. And this centralized government structure answers to the World Health Organization. So what we've seen, in effect, is a global coup d'etat. We now have in embryo, already in existence, a little world global government around WHO. And if we look at what's going on in Copenhagen with the carbon or the carbon emissions treaty, whatever, you can see that the WHO will complement the UN when it comes to dividing up the control over nation states. WHO is going to take the health services, the military and the police, and the UN is going to take over control of the economies as a whole. So between them, they're going to have full control of our nation states, and this is happening as we speak. How serious the situation is can be seen if we look to the USA, to France, or to the Ukraine. The USA on the 23rd of October declared an emergency over the swine flu pandemic, and this allows the president to activate laws which allow forced vaccinations and quarantine, even in the USA. And people who refuse to take these vaccinations or quarantines are classified as criminals. This is also the case under Austrian pandemic plan. that if you are suspected of having the swine flu and you refuse treatment, then you're guilty of a criminal offence. And of course, the police are allowed to use deadly force against criminal suspects, and they're allowed to, bundle you into a van and drive you off. France is also on the verge of declaring a full-scale martial law. It was announced just a week ago, and could happen any single day. This will allow borders to be closed, schools to be closed, ban all public gatherings, restricted access to hospitals, to orphanages, to all social services. Body bags are being sent out to people. It's and you can be detained for 6 months without being shown, or without the judge having to be given a reason in France, as soon as this declaration goes through. Already in France, 1,100 vaccine centres have been set up. Military pandemic vaccination teams are operating in these centres. 150 army vaccination teams are conducting vaccinations in these centres. Nurses and doctors have been requisitioned to work in them. There haven't been enough volunteers, and there are reports coming in of doctors and surgeons in the middle of operations, and the police are just coming into the hospitals and marching them away to work in the vaccine centres if they have not fulfilled their obligation to turn up at a certain time and date. This is what's happening in France right now. And in the Ukraine last month, the President Viktor Yushchenko declared martial law over what appears to have been a deliberate outbreak of the pneumonic plague or something similar to that. At any rate, a group of Ukrainian doctors wrote an open letter where they accused Yushchenko of committing genocide by means of these vaccines. They asked, why has the California H1N1 A virus, or how come it's turned up here in the middle of the Ukraine? Where did it come from? And they concluded that it could only have come from somebody putting it deliberately into circulation, and they said this was the government doing it, and they must have been doing it by putting it into the vaccines. Many experts think there will only be a pandemic if enough people take this vaccination, just as it happened in 1918 with the Spanish flu. It was the people who took the vaccination who were much more likely to get ill and spread that disease. And Greece, which had no mass vaccinations, also had almost no deaths from the Spanish flu in 1918. So you're actually putting people at risk if you go and take your swine flu jab. How many of you have been informed, though, about these facts by the media? And these are facts. If you go to the original sources and check the documents, check the EMA documents, for example, you'll see that these vaccines have not been tested for safety. They're being allowed under emergency procedures. If you check the pandemics and Fawcett-Trier documents, you'll see there are no clinical trials. Now, this information is just not getting through to people. Instead, anybody who refers to these facts and documents is actually called a conspiracy theorist and marginalized. The close alliance between the media and the pharmaceutical companies can be seen is underlined by the way James Murdoch, the son of the world's most powerful, perhaps, media mogul, Rupert Murdoch, is a director of GlaxoSmithKline, the manufacturer of the pandemic swine flu vaccine. Murdoch's News Corporation is one of the handful of truly gigantic TV and newspaper enterprises that dominate the global media landscape today. And the whole swine flu outbreak in April, or since the swine flu outbreak in April, these news outlets have been telling us that millions of lives, if not billions of lives, are at risk from the swine flu virus. They're telling us that it's going to cause a significant number of illnesses and fatalities, disrupt our economies and societies, and that it has the potential to mutate and become more lethal. They don't mention that if it does mutate and become more lethal, the vaccines will be useless. We're told the pandemic originated among pigs in a slum in the failing state of Mexico City, but the pigs have never gotten ill from this virus, and indeed It's part pig, part human, part bird.